announcements made, and I request protocol to escort His Majesty. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Presidente de la
Distinguished President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Chavo, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Heads of accredited missions to the 77th session of the General Assembly, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, to all of you. I come from the three most beautiful countries on earth. There is an explosion of life there. Thousands of multicolored species in the seas, in the skies, on land. I come from the land of the yellow butterflies and magic. There, in the mountains and valleys of every shade of green, not only are there abundant waters, there are also floods of blood. I come from a country of blood-stained beauty. My country, Colombia, is not only beautiful, it is also violent. How can violence and beauty exist side by side? How can the biodiversity of life intertwine with the dances of death and horror? Who is responsible for breaking the charming spell with terror? Who or what is responsible for suffocating life in the routine decisions of wealth and interest? Who is leading us to destruction as a nation and as a people? My country is beautiful because it has the Amazon jungle, the Chocó jungle, the waters, the Andes mountain range, and the oceans. There, in those jungles, the oxygen of the planet emanates, and the CO2 in the atmosphere is absorbed. One of those plants absorbing carbon dioxide amongst millions of species is one of the most persecuted on Earth. Wherever it grows, they seek to destroy it. It's a plant of the Amazon, the coca plant, a plant sacred to the Incas. As if at a paradoxical crossroads, the jungle we try to save is being destroyed at the same time. To destroy coca, they spread poison, glyphosate, massive amounts that run in the waters. They arrest those who cultivate coca and imprison them. To destroy or to have possession of coca plants, 1 million Latin Americans die, and 2 million African Americans are imprisoned in North America. Destroy the killer plant is a cry from the north, but the plant is just one among many of the millions that perish when fire breaks out in the jungle. Destroying the jungle, destroying the Amazon has become the catchword which states and business people follow. They ignore the call of scientists who baptize the jungle as one of the major climate pillars. For power relations in the world, the jungle and its inhabitants are those responsible for the plague that afflicts them. The relations of power are plagued by the addiction to money, to perpetuate themselves, addiction to oil, to cocaine and harder drugs that can serve to anesthetize them. There is nothing more hypocritical than the discourse of saving the jungle. The jungle is burning, distinguished delegates, while you make war and play with it. The jungle, the climate pillar of the world, is disappearing along with all of its life. The enormous sponge absorbing planetary carbon dioxide is evaporating. The savior jungle is seen in my country as the enemy to be defeated, as the weeds that must be pulled out. The space of coca and the people who cultivate it, because they have nothing else to cultivate, is demonized. For you, my country interests you only if you can spread poison in its jungle, take its men to prison, and cast its women into exclusion. You are not interested in the education of children, but rather in killing their jungle, extracting the carbon and the oil from it. The sponge that absorbs poison is useless. You prefer to spread more poison into the atmosphere. We serve to excuse the gaps and the spaces in our own society, in your own societies, which leave you to live in the bubble of drugs. We conceal your problems, which you refuse to reform. It is better to declare war on the jungle, on its plants, on its people. While you let the jungle burn, while hypocrites obliterate plants with poison to hide the disasters in their own society, we are called for more and more carbon, more and more oil, to console the other addiction, the addiction of consumption, of power, of money. What is more harmful to humanity, cocaine, carbon dioxide, or oil? The will of power has ordered that cocaine as a poison must be persecuted, even though it causes a minimum of overdoses and more because of the mixtures which lead to its being trafficked. But on the other hand, carbon and oil must be protected, even though their use can lead humanity to extinction. This is the way world power works, with injustice, with irrationality, because world power has become irrational. This power sees in the exuberance of the jungle, in its vitality, a sign of lust and sinfulness, the sinful origin of the sadness of its societies, imbued with the unlimited compulsion to have and to consume. How can we hide the loneliness of people's hearts, the drought in the midst of loveless societies which compete to the degree of imprisoning souls in loneliness? We conceal this by blaming the plant, the people who cultivate it, the secret freedom of the jungle. According to the irrational power of the world, the fault is not in the market, the fault is in the jungle and those who live there. Bank accounts have become unlimited. The money of the powerful cannot be spent even over centuries. The sadness of the existence that produces this artificial call to competition is filled with noise and drugs. The addiction to money and to having things has another face. A drug addiction in people who lose the competition, the losers of the artificial race which has transformed humanity. The sickness of society will not be cured by spreading glyphosate in the jungle. The jungle is not responsible. Society educated towards endless consumption, stupid confusion between consumption and happiness, is what makes it possible for the pockets of the rich to be filled. Those responsible for drug addiction are not the forests. It is the lack of rationality of world power. Let us illuminate power with reason. Let us put on the lights of this century. The war against drugs has lasted for 40 years. If we do not correct our course, and it goes on for another 40 years, the United States will see over 2,008,000 more overdoses of fentanyl. This has not happened in Latin America. There will be millions of African Americans who will be imprisoned in private jails. They will become the pawns of the prison business. Another million Latin Americans will be killed. Our waters and our green fields will be filled with blood. We will see the death of democracy, the dream of democracy, die, both in my America and in English-speaking America. Democracy will die where it was born, in the great West European Athens. To hide the truth, that you will see the jungle and democracy die. The war against drugs has failed. The war against climate change has
살아나기 위해서는 마약에 대한 전쟁의 경로를 바꿔야 합니다.
From soft drugs, we moved to hard drugs. There's been a genocide in my continent and in my country. It has led millions of people to prison to hide their own social flaws. They have blamed the jungle and its plants. They have filled discourse and politics with irrationality. I call here from my wounded Latin America to an end to the irrational war against drugs. Decreasing drug consumption does not need wars. It needs for all of us to build a better society with more solidarity, with more affection, where the intensity of life will save people from addiction and new slavery. Do you want fewer drugs? Think of fewer profits and more love. Think of a rational exercise of power. Do not affect the beauty of my country with your poison. Help us without hypocrisy to save the Amazon jungle, to save the life of humanity on Earth. You brought together the scientists, and they spoke reasonably. With mathematics and climate models, they said that the end of the human species was upon us, that the time left to us is not even millennia, not even centuries. Science sounded the alarm, and we stopped listening. The war served as an excuse to not take the necessary measures. When action was most needed, when discourse was no longer useful, when it was indispensable to put the money in the funds to save humanity, when we had to draw away from coal and oil as quickly as possible, they invented one war after another. They invaded Ukraine, but also Iraq, Libya, Syria. They invaded in the name of oil and gas. In the 21st century, they discovered the worst of their addictions, the addiction to money and to oil. Wars have served as an excuse to not counter climate change. Wars have shown them how dependent they are on what will put an end to the human race. If you observe that the peoples of the world suffer from hunger and thirst and emigrate in their millions towards the north where the water is, then you imprison them, you build walls, you use machine guns, you shoot at them, you expel them as if they were not human beings. You multiply by 5 the mentality of those who created the policies of gas chambers and concentration camps. You're reproducing 1933 at a planetary scale, the great triumph of the war on reason. Do you not see that the solution to the major exodus triggered towards your countries is going back to water in the rivers and fields full of nutrients? The climate disaster is full of viruses which are working to overcome us, but you are turning even medicine into business and vaccines into merchandise. You propose that the market will save us from what the market itself has created. Humanity's Frankenstein is allowing the market to act, and the wish for profit to reign unplanned, giving up our hearts and minds to it. Human rationality is brought to its knees by avarice. Why are we looking at wars if what we need to do is save humanity? What use are NATO and the empires if what is upon us is the end of intelligence? Climate disaster will kill hundreds of millions of people. And listen to this. It is not produced by the planet. It is produced by capital. The cause of climate disaster is capital. The logic of relating ourselves to consume more and more, to produce more and more, and for some to earn more and more money produces a climate disaster. It is articulated with the logic of amplified accumulation. The energy drivers of coal and oil triggered the hurricane. The change in the atmosphere is increasing the deep and potentially mortal. From the lands of the jungle and beauty, where they decided to make a plant of the Amazon an enemy, extraditing and jailing those who cultivate it, I call on you to put an end to war and put an end to climate disaster. Here in the Amazon jungle is a failure of humanity. From the bonfires burning after their poisoning, there is a wholesale failure, failure of human civilization. Behind the addiction to cocaine and other drugs, behind the addiction to oil and coal, is a true addiction of this phase of human history, the addiction to irrational power, to profit, and to money. This is the enormous, fatal machinery that can extinguish humanity. As a president of one of the most beautiful countries on earth, one of the most bloodstains and violent, I propose that we put an end to the war on drugs and make it possible for our people to live in peace. I call on all of Latin America to join us in this purpose. I call the voice of Latin America to be united to defeat the irrational world that is killing us. I call on you to save the Amazon jungle with the resources that can be devoted to life throughout the world. If you do not have the ability to finance the fund to revitalize the jungle, if it is more important to devote money to weapons than to life, then let's reduce external debt to release our own state budgets so we can carry out the task of saving humanity and life on the planet. We can do it if you don't want to. All we have to do is exchange debt for life, debt for nature. I propose this and I call from Latin America to do this. Let us dialogue to put an end to war. Do not put pressure on us to go to war. It is time for peace. Let the Slavic people talk to each other. Let peoples of the world talk to each other. War is only a trap which draws us closer to the time of to the end of time in the great orgy of irrationality. From Latin America, we call on Ukraine and Russia to make peace. Only in peace can we save life on this earth. There is no peace without social, economic, and environmental justice. We are at war with the planet too. Without peace with the planet, there will be no peace between nations. With no social justice, there is no social peace. Thank you for your kind attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Colombia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly